the heading was, "We will not win this war without women." The media outlet has reported that around 70,000 women are already in the Ukrainian armed forces, and 5.5 thousand of them are performing combat missions. Against the background of desertion that has aggravated after all those corruption scandals, because everyone understands to whom they should sacrifice their lives, not for some motherland, not for Ukrainian people, but for packages with money that are allocated to Bankova by those tranches from the European Union and other countries. Against this background, the news about future possible recruiting of women could be implemented. In order to prolong its existence, the Kiev regime heads are just continuing to sacrifice everyone. Women, young people, it's no difference for them. The Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine has admitted that its policy to destroy the Russian language is not mistaken, but the right one. And according to the European Charter of Regional and National Minorities Languages, it's also about the growth of the use of Russian language, especially among young people. It was confirmed by Yelena Yelanovskaya, ombudsman, and her daughter. You would laugh at that. It's ridiculous. Your daughter is posting on social media in the Russian language. So how does it fit into this policy by the Kiev regime? How have they reached that? It's because they are not normal, because they are insane. It's the extermination of everything that is Russian in Ukraine, despite the protection, alleged protection in their own constitution, Ukrainian constitution, of the Russian language. Somewhere Zelensky just vehemently trying to prove it's about NATO, that it's written in the Ukrainian constitution. But you just choose what you implement and what you do not implement from the constitution. Like Vladimir Vinokur has mentioned, when the fish is packed, and what is about the constitution? What is written about the Russian language? Or have they just let it go by itself, or all those sections of the constitution? So the decision by the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, it was obvious the continuation of these destructive lines. It's a testimony of anti-people regime being in power in Ukraine. So people speak Russian, but the regime is destroying, as if it's not, does not understand it's the language in which the people of Ukraine think and speak. And no one mentions that people should speak just one language, because our country is an example of how people, according to their culture, according to their peculiarities of some geographic area, historic context, to study, to have education in different languages. But what is happening in Ukraine with the language, it's just complete insanity. Of course, such steps testify of any aspirations for peace in Kiev, because it should be cancellation of discrimination with regard to the Russian language and the respect for the right of all the nationalities residing in Ukraine. Now the Kiev regime needs to comply with human rights. But the situation with Midis, the scandal, and that gang corruption scandal just growing in volume in Ukraine. So many international anti-corruption structures have been created, and at the domestic level, it's just not corruption in Ukraine, but some construction sites, something has been stolen, or for education, some budget allocations stolen. It's another thing. It's corruption connected with the war, connected with bloody money. And corruption connected with lawless spread of weapons, but not considered by anyone, not taken into account, without any audit. Where is this international community that has just given birth to so many structures connected with international corruption cases and fighting corruption? So where does money come from to Bankova? Those dollars and euros, do they earn them? No, they do not earn them. They just exchange them to the lives of their own citizens. Where does this money come from? From abroad? Who allocates them? If someone has doubts, maybe those allocating this money to Bankova, they are not aware of total corruption in Ukraine. There is just one simple argument against that. In the West, they allocate this money to Kiev. That is why they do not conduct any audits. They do not have any monitoring or analytical mechanisms that could somehow trace where this money goes. And why? Because that's a unified corruption chains. And the facts that have been revealed within the Brussels bureaucracy are just a confirmation of that. Mogherini, she's not just alone. She had just the entire team there working. On the 13th of November in Kiev, near the Literature Memorial House of Mikhail Bulgakov, there was another anti-Russian action. The great writer, he was accused in Ukraine. What do you think he was accused of? He was accused of Russian chauvinism and demand that Ukraine be rid of it. But he is dead. He is no longer alive. What will happen further? Will the books by Bulgakov be burned? But if there is some American film based on Bulgakov's novels, will they ban it in Ukraine? Will it not be allowed? But as a proof of crimes by Bulgakov, actually he was born in Kiev. And they used to be proud of him. They used to say that he's a Ukrainian writer, actually. But now, that's it. As they say, he is a representative of Russian chauvinism. As a proof of his crimes, the Banderites just quoted his White Guard novel with negative characteristics of nationalist hetman Pavel Skoropadsky and Simon Petlura. The Ukrainian National Memory Institute, just in brackets, quotation marks, because it's the National Amnesia Institute, actually, qualified Bulgakov in 2024 as a symbol of Russian imperialist policy. I would like just to ask, is it within the framework of decommunization or fighting Russian imperialism? I'm just interested, because they should just somehow choose. So it's just tireless efforts by the Russophobes that are trying to delete, to cut out of public memory any hints of common history of Ukraine and Russia. And there were also statements about the unveiling of sculpture in the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra. Who do you think? Sculpture of whom? Maybe some martyr? No? Hetman Mazepa. Because now it's a museum, actually, and anything can be built there. So now it's Mazapa, no other place where he could be erected. But this event, it was just a quotation.
They just called it as the symbol of continuation of the Ukrainian tradition. But it's just humiliating that they put up this monument. It humiliates the memory of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian history. Well, it's quite interesting that they put up that memorial in that place because the Russian Orthodox Church has put anathema on Ivan Mazapa. That's why putting up the memorial in his honor on the territory of the global Orthodox sacred site is just sacrilegious. Well, they are putting up new heroes. Ivan Mazapa there. Well, the natural course of history will help the Ukrainian people to oust this Banderite gang. All these facts that I mentioned at the briefing confirm that the objectives to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, as well as to address threats emanating from from its territory, still hold true. Today in the press center of Россия сегодня there will held a presentation on crimes committed against women and children. And the briefing will be provided by Maxim Grigoriev, Mягков, many other officials, Andrei Kartapolov, a member of the State Duma. The UN Security Council approved the resolution that calls to fully observe international norms with respect to women and children. Crimes committed by the Kiev regime is a glaring violation of the UN Security Council resolution. The resolution also says that all states bear responsibility for putting an end to impunity and for holding accountable those who are responsible for the crimes of genocide and acts of violence committed against women and children. The report provides a cogent proof of war crimes committed against women and children, which constitute a glaring violation of the Geneva Conventions and the resolution of the United Nations on women, peace and security. We invite everyone to attend this presentation, and this presentation will be available on many platforms of the Russian Foreign Ministry. In many remarks, I've been talking about the price that is being paid by ordinary Europeans for the hybrid war that has been launched by their countries against Russia. They report about the alleged success in the phase out of Russian energy imports. They are so proud of their work. They claim that the phase-out of the Russian energy resources is a huge achievement of the European bureaucracy, and it is a guarantee of the EU's security and prosperity. All this is accompanied by contrived speculation that with each new package of restrictive measures targeting the Russian fuel and energy complex, the collapse of our country's energy sector and economy as a whole is supposedly drawing ever closer. Well, they have put a carrot in front of the European donkey, and they say that you need to run faster because you will reach the carrot. The donkey said that it's not strong enough to go, but they say that you need to make a few steps further to reach the carrot. That's what the situation is today in Europe. They were saying, even Obama was saying, that our economy is nearing collapse, but it's not true, which is confirmed by trends and facts and reality in general. Well, it is difficult. It is complicated. It is a challenge for us. But what they are saying about our country and our economy is total nonsense. But let's talk about what is going on in their own countries with facts in our hands. The reckless termination of Russian energy imports has seriously hit the European Union itself. Having abandoned well-established energy cooperation with our country, the EU has faced a sharp increase in gas prices and, as a consequence, in electricity prices. This is reluctantly but nevertheless acknowledged within the EU itself. According to official EU statistics, in the first half of the current year, the average household gas price amounted to about 115 euros per megawatt hour. For comparison, previously the average gas price in the European Union fluctuated within a range from 5 to 35 euros per megawatt hour. Well, they can still do the math. If we divide 115 euros by, well, let's take not 5 euros, but if we divide 115 euros by 35 euros, well, we can see that the difference is 3 or 3.5. But if we're talking about the average price, it has increased dozens by dozens. In other words, the difference is huge. The average figure does not even reflect the gravity of the problem. In some EU member states, a far more dramatic increase has been recorded. In Sweden, 213 euros per megawatt hour. That's how much Swedish nationals should pay for gas and electricity. In the Netherlands, almost 162 euros. In Denmark, about 131 euros. Against this background, it is telling that in Hungary, which continues to import Russian gas on balanced terms, price is comparable to the pre-crisis levels at about 31 euros per megawatt hour. Well, ordinary people have no right to say anything. I think they will be even punished for asking a question. A similar trend is observed in the EU electricity market. In the first half of 2020, the average household price, including taxes, was about 200 euros per megawatt hour. In the first half of 2025, the price began to approach 300 euros. The situation is particularly acute in Germany at about 384 euros, Belgium around 358 euros, and Denmark around 349 euros per megawatt hour. Electricity prices for industrial enterprises in the EU, including taxes, also remain at a very high level. Instead of pre-crisis prices of 80 euros per megawatt hour in the first half of the current year, this figure more than doubled, reaching about 190 euros. The highest prices in the EU are paid by enterprises in Ireland, paying almost 273 euros, and Italy, which pays around 234 euros per megawatt hour. These are not political assessments. These are simple facts. Well, probably the Russian ambassador in Italy will be summoned to the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs because they believe that we have no right to speak about the situation in their countries. If they understand that they are a democratic country, it is normal when people are speaking truth using simple facts. While officials in Brussels credit themselves with progress on the path toward energy independence from our country, ordinary Europeans and EU industry are bearing the heavy burden of financing the geopolitical ambitions of Ursula von der Leyen and her associates. I would like to repeat. These are real funds that are being siphoned off every day by the EU leaders from the pockets of literally every ordinary European. At the same time, European enterprises are forced to pay 2 or 3 times more than for electricity than their American counterparts, and 4.5 times more for gas. This has already led to mass closures of production facilities and their relocation to third countries. Key energy-intensive industry sectors are in deep crisis. Production capacities are being reduced across the board, and EU products are becoming increasingly uncompetitive. The problem of energy poverty is extremely acute. In 2024, almost every 10th European could not afford to heat their home adequately. Moreover, given the European Commission's plans to completely abandon Russian gas no later than, as they claimed, January 1st, 2028, and replace it with more expensive American liquefied natural gas, the European Union will face a further deterioration of the relevant indicators. They even forget to say to their own nationals, because this is not just a more expensive US liquefied natural gas, it will be even more unpredictable. It's not even a fact that they will be allowed to enter any long-term contracts. The Russian Federation, in its turn, offered to enter into long-term contracts with fixed prices so that they would have an opportunity to ensure their development that will allow us to have profits and to live in peace and coexistence with the European countries. Anglo-Saxons are not going to treat them in a good way. They will hold them. They will provide them gas and electricity as treats to a pet. And once they do something wrong, all the gas imports from the United States will be stopped, even at exorbitant prices. Meanwhile, a wave of cost-cutting and Christmas elimination is beginning across the EU. Cities in Europe are being forced to abandon festive lighting of streets and squares due to a lack of funds to pay for electricity. It doesn't mean that they won't have any festive lights, but there will be less of them due to the lack of funds. The European Union is plunging into darkness in all senses, in all possible ways. But we're just saying that with a small hint, with a small remark, that we warned you about it and you didn't believe us. And now a number of news that are related to humanitarian, historical sphere and international sphere. In Ankara, on November 18th, an opening ceremony of a bust of the outstanding Balkar poet Kaysin Kuliyev was held in one of the parks in Ankara, in Turkey. Kaysin Kuliyev was a laureate of the USSR State Prize, the International Lenin Prize, and the Maxim Gorky State Prize. A veteran of the Great Patriotic War and the author of numerous works, Kuliyev made a significant contribution to world culture and became a vivid expression of the spiritual strength of the Balkar people and of all Russia. The event was attended by the leadership of the Russian embassy in Turkey, the mayor of the Keçiören district of Ankara, creator of the bust, Leon Akhmatov, member of the Union of Writers of Russia, Asker Daduev, as well as representatives of the poets' families, the diplomatic corps, and the local community. We are grateful to the Turkish authorities and the Federation of Caucasian Associations in Turkey for their assistance and participation in the opening of the monument. We are convinced that promoting the works of the Balkar poet in Turkey will contribute to the further strengthening of Russian-Turkish cultural ties. And some news about France. Oleron Island, on November 24th, a solemn flowers laying ceremony at the graves of Soviet citizens who took part in the resistance movement during the Second World War was held in France on Oleron Island with the participation of the Russian ambassador Alexei Meshkov and diplomats of the embassy. This year, with the assistance of the Russian Military Historical Society, the tombstones of our compatriots Vladimir Antonenko, Mikhail Yershov, Alexander Kovalyov, and Evgeny Krasnoperov Sakharov, who fell in battle during the liberation of the island, were restored at the cemetery of the town of St. Pierre de l'Iran. During the war, Oleron was part of the so-called Atlantic Wall, a system of defensive fortification built by the Nazis. Among the imprisoned construction workers, there operated a group of Soviet patriots led by Antonenko, who carried out acts of sabotage and diversion. In particular, they mined and blew up a German gunpowder depot, destroying the island's entire powder stock. Antonenko and Krasnoperov were shot by the Nazis on the day of the island's liberation, just a few days before victory on April 30th, 1945. The fate of the Soviet prisoners of war who joined forces on Oleron with the first wave Russian immigrants is the subject of the documentary film Voices of Oleron, which is available for a wide audience on the internet. It should be noted that the visit of the Russian ambassador to the region provoked outright hysteria among the so-called pro-Ukrainian associations and activists, who even tried to disrupt the commemorative events. Well, they stopped laying flowers at the Soviet war memorials because Shukhevich and Bandera are more interesting to them. Our heroes were not on the side of Bandera and Shukhevich when they were fighting in the Oleron Islands. Well, this is hardly surprising, since the current Banderite regime in Kiev is the ideological heir of those against whom our heroic resistance fighters in Oleron took up arms. It is encouraging that the many local residents, ordinary French people, expressed their indignation to social media and its conversations over attempt to prevent Russian diplomats from paying tribute to the patriots who died for the liberation of the island and of France as a whole from the Nazis. This ceremony became one of the landmark military memorial events organized by the Russian embassy in France in the year of the 80th anniversary of the Great Victory. It is intended to remind people of the significant contribution made by our compatriots to the resistance movements of French territory, of the key role of the Soviet Union in the defeat of Nazism and the liberation of Europe, and of whom France ultimately owes its status as Victorian power. And in Belarus, a monument to Rokossovsky was unveiled on November 26. The monument was presented as a gift from the Russian Federation to mark the 82nd anniversary of the liberation of the Gomel region from German fascist invaders. At that time, Rokossovsky, a native of Belarus, commanded the Belarusian front and made a significant contribution to the Bagration offensive. The monument shows in metal the 1945 victory parade, which Rokossovsky commanded. The pedestal marks the sites of key battles during the liberation of the Gomel region in 1943, while the base of the sculpture depicts images of Nazi standards shown at the foot of the mausoleum on Red Square in Moscow. In his welcoming address, chairman of the Russian Military Historical Society, Vladimir Medinsky, emphasized the unity of the peoples of Russia and Belarus, who, just as in the harsh years of the Great Patriotic War, stand shoulder to shoulder to ensure the defense and security of our common Union state. He underscored the importance of preserving the historical memory of outstanding military and state figures in order to convey the truth about the heroic past to future generations. Belarusian speakers at the ceremony noted the unshakable nature of the historical brotherhood between Russians and Belarusians, which has withstood a centuries-long test of time, trials, and victories over common enemies. At the same time, it was noted with regret that, unlike Belarus, to the west of the Union state border, a systematic and relentless campaign has been ongoing for many years to destroy the Soviet memorial complexes and barbarically erase pages of the history of the Great Victory with the aim of denigrating the liberators and whitewashing war criminals. On the day of the unveiling, the Rokossovsky Memorial was visited by over 15,000 residents and guests of Gomel. This testifies to the fact that people remember and honor the memory of their true heroes. Against this background, the venomous and rude reaction of pro-Western channels, which seized with indignation on social media over yet another evidence of the fraternal unity of the peoples of Russia and Belarus, is telling. Again, they understood that we remember and we honor the memory of those who made our life possible today. We are grateful to the Belarusian authorities for supporting the initiative of the Russian Embassy in Belarus and the Russian Military Historical Society, as well as for the high quality of the event's organization and the landscaping of the area adjacent to the monument. We intend to continue our active joint efforts to perpetuate the memory of our great ancestors. And now another announcement, quite an important international information. On December 8th, I recall, It will mark the 34th anniversary of the signing of the agreement establishing the Commonwealth of Independent States. This document played a truly historic role, preventing the severance of centuries-old ties between the Union republics and their peoples and laying down sustainable principles for interaction among the newly independent states. The Commonwealth is the most representative organization in the post-Soviet space in terms of membership. Projects are being implemented within the CIS framework in virtually all spheres: political, economic, cultural, and humanitarian, as well as security. Coordination of positions on pressing issues on the international agenda is actively pursued. A solid legal framework has been established and continues to develop, comprising over 650 international treaties. Cooperation between the CIS and external partners is growing, primarily with the UN and leading Eurasian structures such as the EAEU, the CSTO, and the SCO. And on October 10th, at the Commonwealth Summit in Dushanbe, the SCO was granted observer status with the CIS. The CIS countries do everything to preserve the objectives and purpose of this association. We have a free trade zone for goods and services, with over 95% of transactions between Russia and other Commonwealth member states being conducted in national currencies. An effective system of multilateral mechanisms aimed at strengthening international security has been established within the organization. Close coordination of actions in this area within the CIS, combined with joint efforts with other regional associations, facilitates the fulfillment of tasks related to combating terrorism, extremism, drug trafficking, and organized crime, as well as protecting external borders. A paramount achievement of the Commonwealth is the preservation of a unified cultural and humanitarian space. The states and peoples of the CIS are united by shared spiritual and moral values based, among other things, on a cherishing of traditions and a shared past. Of particular significance in this regard is the victory in the Great Patriotic War, the 80th anniversary of which was celebrated together this year, including in St. Petersburg, like we are celebrating it today at the forum I am attending. For Russia, building friendly, equal, and mutually beneficial ties within the CIS is a key foreign policy priority, and also December 8th marks the 26th anniversary on signing the agreement on establishing the Union States. For Russia and Belarus, this event marked a new stage in the process of uniting our peoples based on the principles of sovereign equality and the voluntary and good faith fulfillment of mutual obligations. It has become one of the advanced and ambitious integration projects in Eurasia.
Considerable progress has been made in the forming of common social, economic, transport, logistics, humanitarian, cultural, migration, and information space. And the financial and economic, scientific and technological sovereignty of the Union State is being strengthened. Now the Council of the Union State has played an important role, and a bilateral treaty on the guarantees of securities within the Union State has entered into force on the 13th of March 2025. A solid foundation has been laid in the common obligation for defense, sovereignty protection, independence, constitutional order of Russia and Belarus, as well as the protection of territorial integrity and the protection of borders of the countries, with the use of all the forces and means available. Now there are initiatives for the period from 2024-2026. They include the tasks of further forming of social and economic space, strengthening cultural and humanitarian ties, creation of comfortable conditions for the lives of our citizens and for businesses, as well as the growth in joint investments and implementation of innovation projects. The work is carried out for integration landmarks for the period of 2027-2029. Now there is also work for integration of innovation and technology with the economy, and we mark the anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. There is a wide-scale event of thematic events of the Union States. a major plan for that. The initiator has been the International Patriotic Forum Great Heritage Common Future. There is a project for young children of the CIS states, and the project Train of Victory, and festival Young People for the preservation of the historic memory. And there was also an international youth summit, Russia and Belarus, Common History, Common Fate. Media companies of the Union State are being launched in order to unite the media work of the two countries and to bring their work to a new level. Now bigger impetus will be given to this work, because this media resource, it will operate, it will exist. And Russian and Belarusian diplomats coordinate their approaches intensively and share their positions nearly in all the issues of the global agenda. The priorities of the two ministries of foreign affairs include diplomatically accompanying the integrational processes and joint declarations and reports under the auspices of the Union State. Common approaches are being developed for foreign policy interaction. Such a meeting was held on the 25th of November, as we have informed you, in Moscow. The Supreme State Council of the Union State is to hold its meetings and to determine the key tasks of the Union for the near perspective. We do not intend to stop, and we will continue to implement the will of our brotherly people for cooperation and deepening the partnership for social and economic progress of the two states, strengthening their positions on the international arena and for the benefit of our citizens. Now, one more remarkable, I think, but among notorious topics. On the 2nd of December, the Parliament of the Faroe Islands approved the amendments to local legislations. What do you think it was? It's a legal framework for the enlargement of the autonomy participation in illegal anti-Russian sanctions by the EU. That's ban on fishing of Murmansk Seafood and Noreba, Russian fishing companies. Although Tórshavn has been supporting the anti-Russian policy of Copenhagen since 2022, this step, I think, it's unprecedented because it has been adopted under an absurd pretext. Allegedly, Russian fishing vessels participating in some hybrid operations, maybe some plot of fish. They have revealed that, but detected, but those were just baseless accusations by the Faroe side and by the EU that has initiated those restrictions. And other states have supported, including Norway. Moreover, the authorities of the autonomy have repeatedly confirmed the lack of proof of some illegal activity by Russian fishing ships. But this concept, how is it united into some unified idea? It's difficult to say. It all indicates the politically motivated nature of those changes. It was despite the protests by some politicians, business circles, and public figures. It's just this notorious Euro-Atlantic solidarity. Tórshavn is ready to abandon the pragmatism It used to demonstrate in international relations, but for what? For the sake of what? Just because of the pressure. Because for decades our country has been a partner of the Faroe Islands in fishing. For example, Russia has provided considerable assistance when the Faroe fishermen faced sanctions by Copenhagen and the so-called allies, the EU and Norway. When in 2013 there were restrictions against the Faroe Islands, so far we have abstained from countermeasures against Stonshaven since 2022. It was for constructive links in fishing, constructive ties. But all that just questions the relations in fishing, fruitful relations, bilateral cooperation since the 27th of November 1977. And adequate response measures are to be taken. Now the adoption by the General Assembly by consensus of the unified negotiations format on international communication security, international information security, global mechanism on developments in the field of ICTs. The agenda includes all the sphere of digital space, international security, building trust between states, capacity building in ICT security. The parameters of the future body have been determined that would respond to the interests of the global majority and the participation of all the UN member countries without exception, and intergovernmental nature of the negotiations and the consensus procedure. So we call upon all the countries to participate in this depoliticized and constructive mechanism, and Russia will continue its efforts to overcome digital gap and to ensure international security and respect of sovereignty in international information security. Now one more announcement about the 10th International Cadet Charity Ball in the Kremlin. Now it's the cooperation of schools with cadet classes, activists of patriotic, volunteer, youth and sports organization in Russia and abroad. It's about popularizing the rich military traditions and taking into account the anniversary of the great victory. Special attention will be paid to veterans and participants in the special military operation and their relatives. This event is supported by year on year by the President of the Russian Federation, of course the regions, the legislative authorities. So many welcoming statements to participants of this very beautiful and very important event. And Sergei Lavrov has also sent a welcoming statement to the participants of this cadet ball. It will be about mercy, courage, and the love for the fatherland. And I'm ready to answer your questions now. We have hybrid format today. There will be some questions from those who are present and from our participants online. Now let us start with those who are present. 78th channel, Ksenia Kirtishnikova. Actually, I have some questions. The first one, as Rustem Umerov headed the Ukrainian delegation for negotiations with Russia and the US, how do you think it could influence future possible negotiations on the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine? Could you please repeat once again? I misheard. Could you please repeat your question? Rustem Umerov, instead of Andrei Yermak, headed the Ukrainian delegation for negotiations with the US and Russia. How do you think it could influence negotiations aimed at the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine? You know, I would like to remind you, it's not the first time. As we know, Umerov has already headed the Ukrainian delegation during the 3 rounds of negotiations in Istanbul that were then paused by the Kiev regime. For us, it's not the personality of some Kiev regime or Ukraine representative that matters, but the substantive talk aimed at the elimination of the root causes of the conflict. Whether Umerov is ready for that, I think time will show in the specific result. My second question, what friendly states are influenced in visa-free trips to Russia, and what conditions are to be observed for the cancellation of visas by us? So, to reply which countries are interested, I think all the countries are interested. Naturally, all the countries with normal regimes who are not aggressive. For citizens to have more access, easier access, movement, enshrined in many international documents, but I think this question is not very relevant because it does not have some specific answer. And what conditions, what requirements, it's always discussed with the relevant country, and in our country an interagency development process should be carried out, and then such decisions are taken. For example, as in the case with China, such decisions have been taken on a mutual basis. So my third question is about the number of Chinese tourists in Russia. When will it go back to pre-pandemic levels? And is there now an objective to diversify the area of tourism in Russia, tourism to Russia? So it's more of a question for the authorities who are engaged in the touristic exchanges. Regarding the Chinese tourists, I think it's obvious there will be more of them, because recently a decision has been taken. It has been declared officially that mutual decision, visa-free regime for Chinese citizens, that facilitation for the specific categories, and that will just contribute to touristic exchanges. Now is international life, международная жизнь with us online. We will just go one by one, those who are present and those who are online. So a former senior British officer has told that British special forces in Afghanistan, it's about the events that took place 12 years ago. He committed war crimes by executing several suspects, and despite the knowledge of that, the superiors had done nothing about it. But this comment, there was a comment, but I would like just you to detail on that more. Actually, we come back to that regularly, because we're not so much concerned about domestic affairs of Great Britain, but it's an international fact, because actually Great Britain just makes such declaration that there's canonically adhere to human rights, but we see that that is not the case, and we see the new proof of that, because those extrajudicial killings, those facts, like including British commandos and the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment. Just to remember this military operation, it was called Enduring Freedom. All those facts were revealed during some years. The relevant public inquiry is being carried out in the UK. The testimonies of 4 British servicemen have been published. They spoke about the killings of women and children and other criminal offenses by servicemen. The captured Afghans were regularly shot because allegedly they planned attacks against soldiers. Cases are also cited when in clearing some objects by special services representatives, they fired at an anti-mosquito net, behind which it was further proved women and children were hiding. So the details have been falsified further because it's a crime. It's not just killing, it's a crime. And the person who fired, he was rewarded. Just imagine this level of cynicism. And there were internal checks that were just of formal nature. And they were needed in order to create an illusion of control over the situation. And I would repeat, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and its replies to questions and reactions to public material has repeatedly assessed publicly such crimes, actually military crimes by the British. And I will post links to these materials in the text of the Today briefing. The materials we have cited for many years. In 2023, we mentioned it during the briefings. There were messages, statements for the media. Now the white book on crimes against civilian population in Afghanistan. We will also post a link to that. So all the public facts and the facts that are to be revealed need to be thoroughly investigated, and the guilty should be prosecuted. So those Western servicemen, they are just ignorant when it concerns civilian lives, but they're just teaching others and just meddling in the affairs in some other parts of the world, and they do not see what is happening just nearby. It's hypocrisy, double standards. And I would remind you that London has repeatedly positioned itself nearly as some paragon in human rights, but it has ignored just a near paragon in morality and humanity. It was teaching others. So I would highlight that the crimes by British servicemen and those who were representatives of military contingents taught by those servicemen according to their standards. So they just need the attention of what is just mentioned by the Westerners, the Hague Tribunal. So maybe they will think about that. Thank you. Ria Novosti, please.
Thank you, Ms. Zakharova. Cristina Rodriguez, we have 2 questions for you. First, I would like to know what are the priority issues that the Russian delegation wants to raise at the OSCE Foreign Ministers' Council on December 4th and 5th, and I would like to say that the Russian delegation will be led by Grushko. I like to say that the strategic statement was made by the Russian side in the article published by the Russian foreign minister. It was published in Rossiyskaya Gazeta, Russian newspaper in English. It provides assessments of the OSCE's work. It provides our main approaches to the OSCE. We will use our participation in the OSCE Foreign Ministers' Council to communicate our approaches and assessments to the SCU's work. As Sergei Lavrov repeatedly stated, especially in his recent article, the OSCE is in the deep crisis, especially during the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, and I cannot say that the organization has good outcomes of the work. It doesn't seek any consensus. Some states even accept the OSCE resources, and they serve the narrow interests of the EU and NATO countries. OSCE stopped implementing the true objectives and goals of the OSCE. And at the upcoming session, we plan to demonstrate the OSCE has lost its unique political instrument for many years. It hasn't held any events on countering global transnational crime, that many issues are being discussed only in line with the confrontational European narratives. Many areas are being ignored with showing special bias to values that have nothing to do with the interests of other OSCE countries. We also are going to do our best to make sure that Russian delegation, and you mentioned the leader of the Russian delegation, Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Grushko. He will speak about the topics that are of particular interest to all countries of the OSCE, including counterterrorism, radicalization, drug trafficking, cyber threats, fighting corruption, development of digital economy, transportation infrastructure, protection of traditional values, history, linguistic, cultural, and religious rights and their promotion. The current European elites that have put all the OSCE's work in the deadlock, they need to understand what they have done, but they need again to recognize what they have done, because they do not even admit their guilt. It is true that there are some chances, we still have some chances to save the organization and its principles, but the Western minority is killing it. So we have fewer chances every day. So we need to put a question if the European elites are ready to abandon confrontational schemes, but if they fail to do so, then the collapse of the OSCE is inevitable. And the second, could you please comment yet another expansion of anti-Russian sanctions by the Council of the European Union, and now they are doing that on the grounds of the human rights violations. Yes, it's another example of how human rights is being used by the EU in international relations. They have instrumentalized it. When it's necessary, they use the pretext of human rights to put pressure on countries, but when it's not necessary and when there are problems with human rights, they turn a blind eye to violations of any human rights in EU member states and in individual candidate countries. For example, in Ukraine, whatever happened in Ukraine with human rights, but human rights do not exist in Ukraine anymore, and EU has never said anything about it. They are talking about countries that are not part of the EU, but, for example, they do not speak about Moldova and what is happening there. I would like to highlight that EU has no moral right to lecture others, especially in its particular state. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia legally informs the international community about the alarming trends in the humanitarian field in EU countries, in particular manifestations of intolerance, racial and religious discrimination, glorification of Nazism and spread of neo-Nazism, encroachment on rights of ethnic minorities and indigenous peoples, and the dire situation of the penitentiary systems, reprisals against opposition, independent mass media, despite numerous preposterous claims of EU officials about their commitment to democratic values. You can find a thematic report on the website of the Russian Foreign Ministry about it. Sputnik Kazakhstan, please. Sputnik Kazakhstan. So there is no Sputnik Kazakhstan. Are you there? I thank you for giving me the word. We have two questions. After the attack on the CTC, Ukraine has has carried out a new attack several hours after the briefing of the Foreign Ministry of Kazakhstan, and it still continues to do so. So what's the reason for that? Well, I explained it. That's their terrorist strategy. We have no doubts about the terrorist essence of the Kiev regime, and our comment made on November 30th have provided all the detailed assessments, and our colleagues from Kazakhstan have also expressed their protest about it. Well, if we have anything to add is that the Caspian Pipeline Consortium was attacked by Ukraine in air and at sea. Where are the representatives of the OSCE that could say something about it? But yet everyone knows that infrastructure of the Caspian transportation corridors serves as one of the key routes for supplying oil from Kazakhstan that ensures 80% of oil imports, which are provided for the large oil companies of the US, UK, and Europe. It doesn't hold criticism, and it looks that Zelensky's regime is trying to protect itself from the Western sponsors. But yet these Western sponsors continue to sponsor the Kiev regime. I think that its sponsors should make all the conclusions because of this attack. And I have a second question, if you allow. Or is it all? Okay, thank you. Ms. Zakharova, hello. Thank you for giving me the floor. Excuse me. Xinhua News Agency. Hello. Prime Minister of Japan has made numerous preposterous statements in the Japanese parliament about Taiwan, and the Japanese Defense Ministry plans to deploy medium-range missiles not far from Taiwan. What do you think about the flawed course of the Japanese government? Well, Japanese government continues to make strange statements about it, and sometimes it is involved in discussions that has nothing to do with the reality. They reaffirm their commitment to the one China principle, but yet they oppose it to the reunification of China and Taiwan. They continue arms supplies to Taiwan. They are in contacts in a provocative way, and they incite separatism attitudes in Taiwan. Their methods are similar to those that are being used in Ukraine today, And the position of Russia is well known about it, and it was reflected at various levels. Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, and we are against the independence of the island in any form. We believe that it is a domestic affair of China, and China has every right to protect its own sovereignty and territorial integrity. We call on Tokyo to stop following the path of remilitarization and return to the true pacifism that is reflected in the national constitution of Japan, and would like to highlight the fact that according to the Japanese constitution, Japan abandoned pursuing war as its right, but yet their actions escalate the situation in the region, and they contravene the Japanese law and the Japanese constitution. Thank you. RT, please. Yes, RT is going to ask their question online. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Marchelena RT Balkan. We have only one question for you. What is the position of Serbia in a new world that will be established after the Russian victory in the special military operation? I disagree with your question because it's up to the people to see the future of their country. We're talking about a sovereign country, an independent country. It's up to the Serbs to decide what their future will be. I can tell you about our bilateral relations. I can tell you about the principles on which a future world order will be based. But again, it's up to the Serbs to decide their future and the future of their country. I think it's an obvious rule that is enshrined in the UN Charter and international law in general. As for the goals of the Russian Federation and the special military operation, it intends to crystallize the development of a world and its evolution to multiple world order with respect for legitimate rights and interests, with the strict observation of the UN Charter in their totality. And we know that Serbia is a member of the United Nations, and we are confident that Serbia will preserve its sovereign status, will be guided by its own priorities, will follow a pragmatic approach and pursue an independent policy, will protect its traditional values. And I would say we would like to develop with Serbia partnership and friendly relations in good neighborliness and in with mutual respect and mutual benefit against all those enemies who are trying to block the comprehensive development of our relations, and they are trying to do everything to delay the development of Serbia as a sovereign state and to damage the development of the Serbian people. Thank you. Yes, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Lenta.ru, Yuri Leonov. December 2nd, Denmark started the construction of the first facility of the Ukrainian military-industrial complex on the territory of the NATO member state. They are planning to build an enterprise for the production of drones. What is the position of the Russian Foreign Ministry, and what effect might it have on the escalation of the situation in Ukraine? We have recently commented a topic at the previous briefing, and we raised the issue and we commented it. Denmark is one of the first sponsor countries of the Kiev regime, has provided components for the production of Ukrainian UAVs that could be used against our people and our cities. It shows the hostile and militarist course of Copenhagen that demonstrates its efforts to derail the efforts to settle the Ukrainian crisis. It risks to escalate the situation and to encourage Ukrainian Nazis and terrorists to commit new barbaric crimes against civilians in Russian regions. And we noted that it's not only the population of Russian regions, but infrastructure, civil infrastructure of other countries, or that is used by other countries. They do not hide that this step should encourage the development of military-industrial complex of Denmark. They want to ensure the enrichment by continuing the massacre and bloodshed in Ukraine. It demonstrates total disregard by Copenhagen of interests of their own population. I'm not even talking about human rights, any trade deal, any facts of international and commercial activities have always been viewed by Copenhagen through the prism of human rights. Is everything okay there? What's going on with human rights in Ukraine? Do they have any right there? Maybe the right, freedom of speech or freedom of religion? Maybe they have a right to live without all this intimidation and propaganda of the Kiev regime that is mired in neo-Nazism. People even don't have rights to their own body organs. If we remember the law that was adopted in 2022 that allows to take body organs away from the bodies of the Ukrainians. We'll provide the links to explain what I'm talking about. You will find it in the text version of the briefing. They are launching military production hastily without showing any interest to the environment. They have no interest in what's going to happen to the environment after that. And they're not even asking the opinion of the Danish population. The Russian side will continue to uphold its legitimate interests and will take proper military and technical measures to neutralize the risks to its national security. Okay, let's go back to our journalists that are online. Media Corporation of China, please. Yes, we have two questions for you. It follows up on the topic that you discussed with our colleagues from Xinhua. Van E recently visited Russia and they had talks with Sergei Lavrov. They discussed their positions on Japan. The question is, what is the Russian approach what is the Russian opinion about the approach to draw lessons of history and the relevant measures that were taken to deepen strategic cooperation between the two countries? Do Russia and China plan to counter the risks or to revive the Japanese militarism? As you know, there is a press release that was made after meeting with Sergei Lavrov. As you know, that this year we mark the 80th anniversary of victory. President of China visited Moscow to attend the victory parade, and Vladimir Putin took part in the solemn celebrations in Beijing on the 80th anniversary of victory over militarist Japan and the end of the Second World War.
And it does not require an assessment of ours, despite underlining this symbolic component. It's a clear signal for the international community on the readiness of Moscow and Beijing to counter together the attempts of the Western countries to distort the history of tragic events, to forget them. I'm talking about the tragic events that happened started in Western Europe and then continued in Asia, and in the 30s, 1940s. It was just bearing the brunt of that fight with German Nazism, and the preservation of memory is our sacred obligation. It's an existential issue for us. Russia and China are at the basis of forming those outcomes of the Second World War. This post-war legal field, because the end of the war, it's not just signing and approving capitulation of the defeated Nazis, militarists. It's enshrining all of that by the Nuremberg Tribunal, then the Far East Tribunal, tribunals in other parts of the world, in specific countries. Next year, in 2026, it will be the 80th anniversary of the tribunal that was held in our country, in Kiev, where justice was with regard to the criminals who killed people. It's the Babi Yar tragedy. It's not only about capitulation. It's about the creation of an international legal system that would guarantee the prevention of another world war. It's the creation of the United Nations Organization as an institute and the forming of relevant mechanisms. We just formed that system together with China. Our cooperation continues as our duty to remember the sacred memory and preserving long-term peace in Eurasia and on the planet as a whole. Thank you very much. My second question. You have mentioned that today already. It's about a visa-free regime with China. In the Chinese Foreign Ministry, they said that it will strengthen our friendship. And what's your assessment of its input into strengthening strategic partnership? We totally share the assessments of our colleagues from Chinese Foreign Ministry. Our cooperation has reached unprecedented scale, a high historical level, historically unprecedented actually, and this cooperation between two powerhouses in modern world, it's strengthening our friendship through mutual travels of citizens. It's a component of public basis of our interstate relations and visa-free entry by a number of categories of Russian and Chinese citizens. It does not only respond to the interests of increasing humanitarian exchanges, but would contribute to interregional cooperation, business contacts and personal contacts for the benefit of the two countries. Is being developed, there is no doubt, but it will lead the mentioned components into the new level, just facilitating documents exchange, planning such trips, and economize money, among other things. It has been developing, and the workload of our diplomatic consular offices and Russian representations, consular offices, embassies in China, embassy in China. Our joint efforts, it was a colossal workload. There were queues, as you know. Despite our diplomats working, Russian, Chinese diplomats working swiftly, working effectively, really made efforts for the citizens, but the workload, it was colossal. But now this major component has appeared in order to facilitate for people, for citizens of our countries, and we can say diplomats, the work and contacts that are to intensify even more. Now, what can I say? In addition, the signal of such steps is obvious. The message in the Eurasian space and internationally in general. Our countries contrary to the countries of global minority, build the bridges of friendship, roads of cooperation, but do not divide themselves by walls, do not invent some restrictions that would complicate the life of ordinary citizens. Our positions are similar to other countries of global majority with whom we work together. Thank you very much. If that's all, we move on. Is Reuters with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova, we are here, and we have 2 questions today, if you do not object. The first one is the meeting by the Russian president with the U.S. Special Envoy that has been held recently, and the question: has Russian Foreign Ministry received any orders from the president on the outcome of this meeting? And if yes, which orders? Yuri Ushakov has replied to this question because he said that the details of these meetings will not be published, as those meetings are working meetings and aimed at result, not some external effect. But that's important because the global community is really tired of aggressive, destructive messages, statements by those destructive information waves that go mostly from Brussels and Western Europe now. But primarily this meeting was oriented towards a concrete result. That was your first question, yeah? One more question, yeah? No, the second question will follow. And it's about the Washington Post reports published recently that Russia and several Western countries, namely Poland, the United Kingdom, Ukraine and Lithuania, are fighting to extradite Russian citizen Yaroslav Mikhailov, who is currently in Azerbaijan and is suspected by the West of involvement in a series of incidents involving the inflammation of parcels in some European countries last year. I think it was DHL warehouses. According to the newspaper, Moscow is supporting the return of Yaroslav Mikhailov to Russia, and the West is demanding his extradition to Poland. I can just reply that I do not have information on that. I have tried to find out but with my colleagues, but we do not have information. We cannot confirm the information published in this article. So if we have no more questions from the present people, Bold News. Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova, Bold News. Ursula von der Leyen has been qualified as politically insecure by Estonian Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna because of there are concerns about blocking Russian funds. And why are the Baltic states so zealous in this issue? And is the EU prepared to listen to them? So it's just they should not do that. It's just it will be a crime. It will not be a good thing. But there are some ideas. Maybe they should risk it. Maybe they will avoid the consequences. But some internal voice saying about the history might repeat. But then there are contradictions that this time, maybe that will work just this time. We have such dialogues on the pages of European media outlets, TV debates and the public statements, but it's a unique opportunity to observe how before us a crime is literally being prepared. In the detectives, we usually see investigations of the crimes committed, but here we can see the preparation of a crime. Reasonable forces are trying to prevent it, but unreasonable forces are just insisting that maybe would be possible to avoid the consequences. Now it's nearly hysteria, searching for ways of confiscation, actually theft of Russian blocked sovereign assets, in order to keep afloat for some time the adventure of the corrupted Kiev regime. Additionally, finance the military complex, hoping that it will somehow pull the European economy from the crisis. So just the money being in the hands of the European Union and for it to decide what should be done with them, it's just criminal logics. And they understand very well that the theft will not be without consequences for the participants in this criminal scheme. It's just a process of shifting responsibility in the EU family. There are threats, blackmail, fakes, and in this situation, the most loud voices are from those who have nothing to lose, who have lost everything. It's just Ukraine being a means of confrontation with our country. It's just a tail controlling the dog. And the dog is just going mad, and nothing remains from that. It's a case when they understand the detrimental Russophobic strategy imposed to the entire EU. It's bordering political insanity, and the wishes to cause damages to the Russian Federation. It's just hiding everything. But it will not remain unanswered and unpunished. The reaction from us will follow, and the global community will react as well, because I would repeat, no one in the European Union just hides that there are no legal basis for such actions. It's not the question of who is to take it, how to share that, but on what may be invented, fantasized legal articles, framework, but it's missing. And just legal, it's illegal theft. There are some reasonable opinions, but in case of actual theft, the response will follow, and it's being prepared. Thank you very much. Thank you. Usdot, are you with us? Hello? A visit by a Russian president to India on the invitation of Narendra Modi will be a key event of the next week. What are the prospects of cooperation in energy and strengthening national currency payments? So it's already a tradition that the presidential administration comments on such visits, and we would add that the practical agreements will be aimed at military cooperation, energy, peaceful atom, and joint efforts will be continued on national payment system using national currencies, and transport logistics route prospects, taking into account the current unfavorable geopolitical realities. It's not about a situational reaction, but it's for long term. It's for secure bilateral partnership free from third-party attempts to undermine it. Thank you. Thank you. Is News Front with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. Am I audible? Yes, I can see you and can hear you very well. Yes, one question, if you allow me. Yesterday, there was a law adopted in Moldova on the denunciation of the agreement on the creation of cultural centers on 1998. How would you comment on that? Yes, actually, yesterday such a law was published. It entered into force, and the embassy of Russia in Chisinau received a note of Moldovan Foreign Ministry to stop the implementation of the mentioned agreement, on the basis of which the Russian House of Culture in Moldova is functioning. It's just a destruction of multilateral ties between Russia and Moldova. It's anti-Russian course, closing Russian media outlets, limiting the sphere of the use of Russian language in Moldova, and totally freeing the Republic of any Russian presence, banning that. Allegedly, this center being the voice of Russian propaganda, it's not subject to any criticism, and this center, allegedly instrument of hybrid war against the Republic of Moldova, this decision is seen by the Moldovans just as mockery for common citizens, and more than 5,000 people have spoken against the closure of this center. But I would highlight that Russia is supporting the principle of non-interference into the domestic affairs of other states. The Moldovan authorities is just propaganda statements, and the law on denunciation of the agreement of cultural center does not mean it's losing its force immediately. According to Article 17 of this document, it is in force and prolonged every 5 years until one party informs another of its intention to suspend this agreement. But the next period ends in July 2026, and until that period the Russian House will conduct its work. This policy is imposed by this European bureaucratical community, sponsors from Brussels, and to what it leads is obvious, it can be seen. Russophobia is detrimental to those who support this inhumane ideology. We are glad that we can observe Moldovans not supporting that. Our country will always remain a friend of Moldovan people, and access to our culture is always open to them. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Virelk with us?
Several days ago, Prime Minister of Armenia went Brussels, and Kaja Kallas offered Armenia as well as other partner countries to join anti-Russian sanctions. She also informed that Armenia will receive millions of dollars to fight against information interference in elections. And again, she also promised to provide millions of dollars so that Armenia wouldn't support Russia. You know, I remember just this situation that imagine that there are vampires in Brussels that are getting closer to normal people, and they say, do you want us to bite you? And you will become like us. You won't reflect in mirrors. You will be afraid of a sunlight. You won't need energy, like power energy. Kaya Kallas just has shown her true colors, and her statement shows that the only goal of the EU in its cooperation with Yerevan is to damage Armenia-Russia relations. They stopped hiding that. Well, probably they wanted to hide it, but their intellectual aptitudes don't allow them to do so. They are trying to damage our traditional, mutually beneficial and mutually respectful cooperation in many sectors, including power energy. What's so bad about Armenians? What's so bad for Armenians if Russia and Armenia develop energy cooperation? There are many energy facilities in Armenia. There is a mutually respectful dialogue and mutually beneficial cooperation. Armenians need to look what these vampires did to their own citizens. I have cited statistics earlier. How much Europeans need to pay for electricity and gas. After this dark fairies worked with the energy cooperation between EU countries and Russia, now they are paying the double price. And they want to do the same thing with other countries. They are using sanctions to damage economic cooperation and energy cooperation between Russia and Armenia and to put it under control. In contrast to Brussels, our approach to developing relations with Armenia and other partners is not about developing friendship against third countries, is not about developing unrealistic projects. Our cooperation is about mutual benefit and mutual respect and for developing common integration associations. You had that you have two questions, so there is another one. The government of Armenia published a number of documents on the negotiating process on the Nagorno-Karabakh settlement process. Some documents testify the opposite, but the pro-Pashinyan mass media and experts are trying to convince that negotiations on the settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflicts have never been carried out around the independence of Artsakh or accession of Artsakh to Armenia, and the status of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic was discussed solely as part of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Azerbaijan. What is your comment about these claims? The status should be determined at the referendum. Are there any restrictions to this question? We noted this information campaign. I should state the obvious. Armenia has shown total disregard for ethical norms. They have disclosed working materials of a Minsk group, and moreover, they have published a correspondence of heads of state without discussing it with interested parties. Some of these phrases in the documents go against the position of Yerevan. At the same time, the disclosed documents of the United Nations and OSCE, in which Russia was actively involved, confirm firmly that over the past 3 decades, our country, in its national capacity and as a co-chair of the Minsk Group, has taken consistent efforts for political and diplomatic settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and we have done a lot of efforts, and we have tried to find a reasonable balance, in particular the respect for territorial integrity of Azerbaijan and ensuring rights and interests of the indigenous Karabakh population in line with the universally recognized international principles and standards. As you stated, Moscow has never had negotiations about independence of Artsakh or its accession to Armenia. As for the response of Igor Popov to the question of mass media on January 13, 2021, I would like to recall that the Russian co-chair of the Minsk Group has refuted claims of the Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan in his article Origins of the 44-Day War that the Russian proposals for conflict settlement were reduced to the return of 7 districts to Azerbaijan, just like that, without addressing the issue of the status of Karabakh. Actually, the situation was quite the opposite, and you could easily find the answer in confirmation. It is enough to read the draft declaration on the first stage and further steps on the Nagorno-Karabakh settlement process that was published on the website of the government of Armenia, as well as the draft statement of Russia, US, and France in support of this declaration, and the draft resolution of the UN Security Council. These documents were discussed at the Armenia-Azerbaijan negotiations before the power changed in Yerevan in May 2018, and no side refuted it, although they failed to reach full agreement. What's important, we had regular negotiations until 2018-2019, when Pashinyan administration, instead of continuing the negotiating process, just suspended the dialogue. And Yerevan started to say that the international recognition of the Artsakh independence will continue a priority for Armenia, as well as they also stated that Artsakh is Armenia, and that said, Artsakh is Armenia. It was said in Stepanakert on August 5th, 2019. What happened after that, we remember that perfectly, the Second Karabakh War in autumn 2020, and it was stopped only through the efforts of the Russian Federation and Vladimir Putin personally. Over the past years, it's not Russia who changed its position, it's Armenia who changed its position, in particular the Armenian leadership, and the position has changed drastically. In the statements following the summit Armenia, Azerbaijan, France, EU, October 6, 2022 in Prague, the Prime Minister Pashinyan recognized the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan and Karabakh as its part. The statement doesn't mention anything about the indigenous population of the region, its rights and freedoms. The agreement that was reached by Russian, Azerbaijani, and Armenian leaders reached in November 2020 to postpone the resolution of this issue in the future was obscured. These documents demonstrate that at various negotiating stages there were opportunities for the political and diplomatic settlement of the conflict. To implement them, strategic vision was required, as well as the political will of the warring parties. The task of the facilitator, in particular the co-chair of the Minsk Group, was to help Baku and Yerevan to settle the conflict, but not to do that for them or instead of them. It is true that according to these documents, there were opportunities, and these opportunities were lost, but it's not Russia's fault. The question is, who's to blame, but, well, it's not up for Russia to answer this question, but it's up for the Armenian nationals to answer it. Thank you. Al-Mayadin, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Israel continues to violate the ceasefire regime that was signed with Lebanon. More than 350 persons died this year. What steps could Russia take as a country that consistently supports stability in the region and observance of international law to encourage Israel to observe its commitments in ceasefire, with regard to the respect of ceasefire, and to prevent further escalation at the border between Lebanon and Israel? We have answered this question, and I believe that such question was asked by your colleagues on October 7th. Our position hasn't changed. Russia stays in regular contact with the Israeli leadership as well as with the authorities and political forces of Lebanon. We discussed this difficult situation that is unfolding on the border as well as other relevant issues. We have concerns that over the past days we have received a lot of reports about the violation by Israel of agreements that was reached on ceasefire in November 2024. We are regularly explaining to the parties involved our principled position about the need to avoid steps that might lead to the escalation of violence and another cycle of armed conflict. Thank you. Tverskaya 13. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. We have only one question. In your opinion, after signing a peace agreement, is it possible to renew economic and political relations with European countries? European countries are trying to hinder the signing of this document. What is the real cause for that? Well, if you allow, I will not answer the first question because we need to figure out who is going to sign the document with whom, and you didn't mention and didn't specify it. And as for the question what Europe is afraid of, people in Western Europe are being intimidated by regimes that condone the ultra-liberal part of the world majority. They have been tied with forces that for decades have been occupying U.S. authorities. They have been working with them together. They're condoning their work, and they are looking forward to their return to power, and they're doing their utmost so that this ultra-liberal, aggressive current or political devastating force would regain power again, so that the voice that has been emerging in different parts of the world, including in the countries of the Western majority that have been speaking in favor of the peace process, they are trying to stop this voice. Those who were against equal cooperation with any country, it was their choice. It was the choice of those regimes. But it's Joe Biden who made them impose these restrictions and sanctions. Biden's team told that the Nord Stream pipelines 1 and 2 should be destroyed. They have carried out so many experiments. When they have been destroying relations with Russia. Again, answering your question will take hours. But in this explanation, you will find why Europe is afraid. We have been talking about it so many times, and I think that everything is obvious. If the French president, without waiting for the results of the US elections, when Trump was competing against Hillary Clinton, they already sent telegrams with the words of celebration to the Democratic Party even before the results of elections were announced. Well, that tells a lot about what they are doing. They have been spreading anti-Trump propaganda. It shows that they are in an absolute and clear interconnection inside the United States, and these forces and these Democrats, these ultra-liberals, they have proclaimed Russophobia as their main goal. And by doing so, they promote their ultra-liberal narratives. Thank you. After E, please. Embassy Live, please. Hello, Ms. Zakharova. Hello, colleagues. Embassy Live. I have only one question. What is the Moscow's opinion about the risks to international trade and energy supplies routes after the attacks? We have made our assessments previously and at today's briefing. Today, energy markets have become a stage of fierce confrontation, not commercial confrontation, but military confrontation. It has become a zone of terrorist attacks. It might lead to the destruction of the traditional supply chains. Geopolitical tensions result to the destruction of the critical transnational infrastructure. The attacks on oil tankers in the Black Sea and on the oil corporation Caspian Pipeline Consortium is again a glaring example of the criminal essence of the Kiev regime, with the tacit support and with the tacit assistance of the West. Why are they doing that? This part of the Western minority have explained that they are going to change the current world order, in particular in the energy sector. Such actions have taken place before. In January, UAV tried to attack a Turkish pipeline. They also attacked facilities of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium in Russia. They also attacked gasometer station in Sudzha. And we should also remember attacks on the Nord Stream pipeline. We continue to our work, and we are trying to find the real culprits, and we are regularly raising this question in the United Nations. We strongly condemn such actions that are aimed at creating risks to international, regional, and global security. Such actions have a negative effect on the energy security. They result into increased energy prices, and we have repeatedly stated that the Russian Federation is an actor of the global energy market for many years. Just let me clarify if we have any more questions. If there are no questions, I thank you for your attention. Thank you, and see you next time.